Welcome back to Beacon in the Storm. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today we're talking about why do men avoid women at work? And I had an episode a couple of weeks back about why do men avoid women, and I wanted to discuss this again because I was going through Twitter or X or whatever we're supposed to call it nowadays, and I came across this tweet, had over 1 million views. It was posted back in April, but it's still being retweeted, reshared, or whatever we're calling it nowadays. And it reads, here's a woman saying, I was talking to a female friend, and she was telling me how lonely it is for her to be working with only men in her team, because they all maintain a respectful distance from her, as they don't want to come off as creeps, not realizing it's completely isolating. And as you can imagine, the comments in there were respectful. I'll say that. They were very respectful, and it was mostly men talking about why would this be the case? All right? It had nothing to do with the woman. Honestly, it had nothing to do with misogyny. It had nothing to do with thinking that she's lesser of any kind, not necessarily had nothing to do with the poster or the woman she was discussing. It almost to the person, every man was saying, we do that because we don't want to get in trouble. And I think this is a topic that really should be discussed more, because we've kind of just agreed, I guess, as a society that men, if they are trying to interact with a woman in the workplace, it's sexual harassment. And that's just kind of the end of it. And I don't mean every interaction, right? But there is this stigma, this stereotype that if a man were to invite a woman out after work, there's probably something there, right? And I mean, all it would take is, hey, Susan, would you like to go grab a drink after work? We can talk about the Smith account. Just that alone can be seen as something that it isn't. And Susan would be well within her right to go straight to HR and say, hey, he's asking me out. I don't feel comfortable. I want to keep business to business. And HR can come down on him, and these are the kinds of things that they were saying in the comments. Guys saying, this is what happened to me. I wanted to talk about an account. I wanted to do this. And boom, I got slapped with a complaint, and I got fired. I got all this. We don't acknowledge, here she says, it's completely isolating that all of these guys are treating her with respectful distance. Well, what else are they supposed to do? What else? What's the alternative? To treat her like a friend? Well, they're not friends, they're coworkers. To treat her, how else? How else are you supposed to treat somebody at work? I mean, you can't make jokes anymore, about anything or anybody. It's essentially the death of comedy in today's uber PC woke world, that we're if we try to make a joke, most jokes require the butt of a joke. You need something at the end of the joke in order to make the punchline, right? And so what are we supposed to be allowed to joke about? You can't joke about management, can't really joke about current events because, PC, they may not agree with your stance on things. No one wants to discuss politics. And so other than respectful distance, I do not understand how we're supposed to interact. This is funny because I go to a Christian luncheon every single week. Okay. And these are Christians who have been involved in television, movies as directors, actors, producers, network owners, that kind of thing. A bunch of heavy hitters, and it's men and women. It's not just men. And they are cracking jokes about each other. Okay. You think Christian are prudes, right? That's kind of one of those stereotypes. And no, they're normal people just like everybody else. They just don't want to fall into that PC trap of not being able to say anything. And so I feel for the woman in the tweet that I read from, right? The one that she was talking about, her friend, where she works in a team of all men and none of the men want to interact with her or keep a respectful distance. Because I can understand how it seems like no one at work likes you. They don't want to be around you. They don't want to hang out with you. Don't want to do anything. That sucks. But that completely ignores, her tweet completely ignores the position that the guys might be in, how they might be feeling. Here comes a woman. She's the only woman in the team. She's coming up and she wants to interact with you, and it's just you and her alone in a room. Yeah, that's not cool. You may not have anything going on. You may not have any interest in doing anything to her. You don't want to get into a situation where you could even be. You might be happily married, have no interest whatsoever in a romantic sense. But here you are in a room, and all it takes is her word that something happened. And because of the Me Too movement and this push for, no harassment at all, zero tolerance policies, that guy could very likely lose his job for nothing but an accusation. And this is something we have to address as a society if we want people to be able to work together again. If you don't want to feel like everybody's keeping a respectful distance and you're the odd one out and no one ever wants to hang out with you, you got to be okay with being treated like everybody else. I've worked in offices where I was the only guy. All right. I was the only guy, and I was like a piece of meat to a lot of these women. They would make some of the most crude remarks. They'd pinch my butt. They would say things to me. And if I ever tried to report it, it was like, oh, come on. It's not that bad. They're just having fun, right? Like, that is the exact scenario where if you flipped everything, right? If you flipped the sexes, people would be freaking out because how dare they sexually harass that woman? Well, in this case, I was a guy and no one really cared because, it is what it is, right? With that, that's too far. However, not every woman was like that in that office. Many of them would just crack jokes and they would make fun of things and I would make fun of them. But as soon as I make fun of them, they would that's a little too far, Brad. And I have to now I am on the fence because, hey, I said something that was almost exactly like what that was just said to me. And because I'm a guy, I'm in trouble. This is what we teach men. And if you're not aware of that, I'm sorry, but that's what we teach men. That is what is happening in a lot of corporate environments. That's what's happening in a lot of professional environments. That's what's happening. I worked retail, happened there. I worked in professional environments, worked there. I worked in public sector, worked there, happened there. This isn't just guys complaining. This is an understanding of the interactions between people and how are we supposed to engage one another. Because I think about that situation I was in, right? And I totally feel for anybody who's in that situation. It's not right. It feels really weird. You feel really wronged when it happens to you. But if a guy goes into an all-woman environment, those women aren't going to change just because a guy shows up. They're going to still make crude jokes. They're still going to say really raunchy things. But if you have a group of guys and they're saying raunchy things and making crude jokes and a woman comes in and she feels uncomfortable, the guys get the smackdown. That group of guys get told that they have to be inclusive. They have to take harassment classes. It becomes a thing because a woman is offended. But we don't necessarily do the same thing when it's a man who's offended. And that should clue you in that maybe, just maybe, the women have to lighten up. If it's a joke, it's a joke. You may not, people say stuff out in the wild, right? They say mean things, they say crude things, and you can be at the grocery store and overhear somebody say something kind of awful. What you gonna do, call the police on them? No. So if you're at the workplace, hey, you don't have to stay there. It's a contract. Everybody's they have to make you feel safe where you work. Physically safe, yeah. If you're working high power lines, they better have a board to be able to smack you off the wire, right? If you touch it, but no falling metal coming out of the ceiling. Sure, feel safe that way. Don't feel like you're going to be attacked in the halls. 100%, I understand that. But jokes, raunchy things that don't have anything to do with you, just maybe we've taken that too far. And because we've taken it too far, people are finding out the ramifications of the slippery slope. And slippery slope being a legal term, okay? It's so what happens is if we take this one action, this next action is the consequence, this next action, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves way down the hill because we slid down because it was just one seemingly clear chain of events that would have gotten us there if we had only seen it at the start. And we have ended up on the slippery slope to No one is allowed to interact with anybody else in anything but the utmost respect and with dignity and with a respectful distance, because we have to keep work and pleasure completely separate in all respects. Otherwise, someone's going to get offended, and if that person gets offended, the business might get sued because of it, and that's the end of anybody wanting anything to do with anybody else. The number of people that I meet, like my best friends in the world, I've known them since I was in middle school. I was asking them the other day, do you have any other friends? Anybody at work? No, we don't hang out with anybody else from work. We keep a respectful distance. Work is work, and we try to have friends outside of work, but it's tough because we spend all day at work, and so we don't really have a lot of friends, which is completely backwards from what it was 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, when you have people who, they were there for their careers. They'd start when they were 21, right? Maybe you're out of college at 22, and they'd be there till they retired in their 60s, right? And so they got to know the people at their job. They got to know everybody that they were interacting with, and they would go out for community events. They'd go out for drinks. They'd go out for sporting events. They'd go out for all this stuff and make friends for life. We don't do that anymore. And we don't do that anymore because what if? What if I say the wrong thing? What if she takes it the wrong way? What if? And because of that, we have women finding out that in order to feel safe at work in every respect, including their emotional well-being, nobody wants to interact with them. At least guys. Women might, but it turns out most of the women that I talk to about their female coworkers, none of them like each other, which is a different issue entirely and not one I want to get into. So, look, I feel for the women out there who are in this situation. I feel for the guys out there, because no one wants to talk about how the guys are feeling. And the guys, like I said, the comment section on this one tweet, it was guy after guy after guy saying, this has happened to me, or this is why I feel that way. This is why I don't interact with. They're guys are talking about this out there, but nobody is taking it seriously. No one is going, hey, maybe this is something that we have to change about how we have structured society and the way we treat work in the Western world. Because otherwise, we feel for the woman because she feels isolated, right? Well, what about the guys who don't have any friends at work because they work with all women, or they work in a mixed company and they don't want they just don't want to have that drama of what if? And so they feel isolated too, even though they want to make friends. When are we going to talk about that? When are we going to change that? When are our politicians going to talk about that? When are our business leaders going to talk about that? When is it ever going to happen that people are going to take the emotional well-being of the guys into account in order to fix what's going on in the workplace? I don't think it will. It won't. These guys are on their own. And you guys out there, I feel for you. You have to have friends. You have to have friends in life. You cannot be on your own. If you're on your own, I feel for you, because that is a lonely road to travel. Please go find somebody, if nothing else, accept Jesus into your heart, because he is a friend for life. He is there for you at all times. And quite honestly, go to church. Even if you don't necessarily are a strong believer or a believer at all, go to church and you'll see a community of people, of like-minded people who like going and seeing each other and engaging with each other and going to community events. You don't have to find that at work. You don't have to find that at a bar. You don't have to find that on Discord. If you want real people, go to church, go to temple. I don't care where you go. Just find faith if you have to, and go and meet people, because you can have a life where you don't have to feel isolated, even though the world may make you feel that way. So that's what I want to talk about today. Keep looking for the light in the tempest, guys. God will show you the way.